You're watching The Ready Writer, a show where I get to speak to writers of all different genres, mediums, and experiences. The Ready Writer. Are you ready? Hey, it's time for another Ready Writer episode with author John Vespasian. Let's take a listen at our podcast.
So I started to write books about personal development 11 years ago, almost 12 years now. So I'm writing about one book per year. And the reason why I started to write is that I could not find in the market the kind of books I wanted to read. Very factual, very objective, based on history, based on real cases. And these are the kind of books I've been writing now for 12 years. I don't think anyone else is writing books from this angle, combining history and personal development and personal finance in the way I'm doing that. And the books reflect my personal interest. It's a combination of the areas I'm interested in, and I think I put them together in a rather unusual way.
Okay. Explain to us your book, Asymmetry. A Asymmetry. What exactly does it? What is it about?
Yeah, Asymmetry. This is the latest book. It's book number 11. It was published a few months ago. And the idea of the book, titled Asymmetry, is that the solution to most problems is not symmetrical, it's not linear. When someone has a headache, usually the problem is not in the head. When someone is suffering from anxiety or depression, usually the problem is not purely psychological, it's going to be something else. Professional problems, financial problems, usually they cannot be easily solved because you don't know exactly the cause. This is why the book goes through dozens of stories in different centuries, different professions, different people, to show how it is very easy to be fooled when you have a problem, you have a situation, you have sometimes an obstacle, or you feel stuck in a certain area. It's difficult to find a solution because we tend to find very, very easy, very automatic to focus on what seems self-evident. And we try to find linear solutions, but in life, this is rarely the case. When someone loses a job and cannot find another job, the problem is usually invisible. There are problems, I mean, we can discuss different cases. Or when someone gets sick, it seems that it was something that happened to him on a particular date. But when you look at the whole story, you will see that the reasons are more profound, the reasons are long-term. And this is what I try to present in the book, to create the sensibility in readers to think asymmetrically. When they have a problem, when they have an obstacle, so that they look beyond the obvious and try to make them easier for them to find the real answers.
Okay. How did you come to gain this information?
I started to create the idea of the book when I was reading biographies of different people. In particular, I started to read the biography of Mozart, a great musician, and the biography of, the book has about few dozen biographies. I don't know how many, maybe 30, something like this, biographies of different people that failed, even if they were very talented and they worked very hard. And Mozart, to give you an idea, he was working 18 hours a day for decades. He died fairly young. He was very talented, a brilliant musician. He never made any money. He was massively stressed, massively suffering from anxiety, and eventually he collapsed and he died. And I found the story very intriguing because the explanations you find when you read the books, they are sort of depressing because, you know, he was an artist, and artists, they have to suffer. And these kind of stories that I think they are not true. And I found this story very intriguing. And I came to the conclusion that Mozart basically failed, and he died very young. He died basically of overwork. With one of the clear cases in history where people work for years and years without taking a vacation, 18 hours a day, and eventually they collapse. And he collapsed and he died. And in my view, the reason is that he could not think asymmetrically. Mozart, like many people today, he was chasing too many rabbits. He was very talented, he was very enthusiastic, and he did everything. He wrote chamber music, I mean, for 4 or 5 players. He performed himself, he gave concerts, he was also an entrepreneur, impresario, he organized concerts. He taught music to children and to adults. He was giving piano lessons. He was also composing all kinds of pieces for weddings, for burials. So in the end, he was doing everything. He was chasing rabbits. He was sometimes working at ridiculously low rates, sometimes making only a few $100 to produce a piece of music. That, to give you an idea, when he died, he was writing a music for a burial. It was performed only once. He was paid about $300 for something that is really a piece of art, a massive genius composition, and he did it for years. So what's the answer? The answer is that when you have this attitude, that like Mozart, that you have the idea, you want to improve your life, you want to do something better, you want to become successful, but you cannot really think asymmetrically. You try to think linearly, to chase every opportunity, to try to maximize your income by chasing different segments, different opportunities. So in the end, you just kill yourself through overwork. You eventually kill yourself. Nobody can sustain this pace for many years. What should have Mozart done? And this is the big question. Well, he should have operated asymmetrically. This is one of the main ideas in the book. Mozart could have made a fortune, I think, easily, if he had concentrated on the only segment of the market where he could make a lot of money. That was opera. Mozart wrote a few operas for the stage, like Don Giovanni, and he wrote a few more, and they were very profitable, because when you write an opera, and we are talking about the 18th century, when you're to write an opera, it would be a stage in Austria, I mean in Vienna, then in Prague, then in Munich, then in London, in Paris, so he could collect royalties from all the performances. He could actually create an asset because the operas would be performed sometimes for years. And Mozart didn't like to write operas because he thought it was like a waste of time, because he had to work with other people. He was not very good at writing, so he needed someone to write the lyrics. And he was working together with a professor, with a Latin professor in Italy, who could write the lyrics in Italy, because in the 18th century, people wanted to see the operas, they have to be in Italian, because it was considered like an Italian, and Mozart was Austrian. So in the end, he could not actually push himself to let go of all the little activities, this teaching music, the performing music, the organizing concerts. He did everything that was unprofitable. He could have easily made a fortune concentrating on opera, but he could not think asymmetrically. He could not realize that there would be a segment in the market where you can really become successful, and there is another 99% where you're basically wasting your time. And he wasted, he wasted his time, as I said, chasing rabbits for peanuts, literally peanuts. He was paid the peanuts, and he missed the great opportunity. And in the book, I present many stories in different areas so that people actually get to think asymmetrically and get to realize that most of the things that look like opportunities, they are not opportunities. They are just a waste of time.
Okay. So give me, and I don't want to, give away the book for free, but can you give me at least one tip for people to rethink, to change their thinking on how to solve a problem they may have?
Yes, well, I can give you many tips, and we can go through different stories. But the first thing you have to do before you actually become able to think asymmetrically, which requires, I think, it's not self-evident. It's something you have to develop by reading a lot of stories, because it's counterintuitive. The first thing you have to do is to start doubting, or to start refusing or discarding the stories you read in the newspapers, you read in magazines about linear success. And let me just give you an example. Most people, when they read the stories in the news about this entrepreneur who made this and this company, or he started this business, whatever, and then after, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, he becomes successful. And it seems like a linear story. It seems like this guy started with a dream, and then he pursued the dream, and he made a plan, and he implemented the plan. When you look at the details in history, and you look at dozens and dozens of biographies, which is what I do in my books, you realize that these patterns of linear success, symmetric success, they are extremely rare. Actually, there is the exception. The rule is not linear. And the problem is that when you read the stories in the newspapers, they only tell you a very small part of the story. They tell you that this guy did this and became successful, but they don't tell you the other 99%, which is normally not symmetric. Let me give you an example I took in the book. One of the most famous writers in the field of sales and personal development is Dale Carnegie. Dale Carnegie wrote books about public speaking, about how to make friends, and how to stop worrying. So very popular books about personal development. And when you look at the books and you look at the type of advice they give you, which seems very most of the time is very common sense advice, you get the idea, the false idea, that this guy was having this dream of writing these books, and wrote the books and became a best-selling writer. And people read the books from Dale Carnegie, and they get the idea that his advice is based on his experience, because it's a very linear advice. And I have to tell you, when you look at the details in the story, they are completely opposite to the impression that people get. The story of Dale Carnegie is not linear. It's completely asymmetric, completely chaotic. The guy was a salesman, an unsuccessful salesman. He was a traveling salesman for years, and he didn't like it. He didn't make a lot of money. Eventually, he gave up his sales career and he wanted to become an actor. And he went to the School of the Dramatic Arts in New York. He graduated after a couple of years. He wanted to become an actor, but he didn't manage to land any roles. He went to several auditions, but he didn't get any roles. So eventually he ended up teaching evening school, teaching classes for adults. And he didn't have a subject, so he created a course about public speaking. This is how he started, and then he was giving these classes in the evening, and then eventually he wrote a book about it. And we are talking about a period of 10 years. Huh? And then the book was not successful. The book didn't sell well. And then after 20 years, he wrote another book about how to make friends, blah, blah, blah. And then the book became a bestseller. And eventually, Dale Carnegie became very successful. But you look at the story, you look at the details, it is completely asymmetrical. And this is very important to get the idea and to understand that 99% of the stories, success stories, happiness stories, they are completely asymmetrical. And people become easily depressed and easily anxious by expecting a linear development in their career, in their health, in their personal finances, and it is a completely unrealistic expectation. And this is something that I underline in the book very, very strongly, because unless you break this delusion of linearity, this delusion of symmetry, you cannot really start thinking accurately. You have to break this intellectual habit, which is very, very dangerous because it creates very unrealistic expectations.
Thank you. So, a little off the subject, what was your publishing process like? How did you know how to get started?
Well, I didn't. This is the simple answer. When I wrote my first book, which is now 11 years ago, almost 12 years ago, it was a process of pure frustration because I could not find the kind of books I wanted to read. So I decided to take a holiday of 4 weeks to write my first book. So I wrote the book in 4 weeks. I working, I don't know, like 10 hours a day. So eventually I wrote the book. It was finished. It was the first draft, and then it took me like, I don't know, 6 months or 7 months to edit the book. So that was the first one. And then eventually, now when I look at my first book, I find so many things I would improve. I mean, I'm quite very proud that I did it. But of course, with time, as you write more and more books, you become, I think, better because you develop more craft. The writing is flows better. It is more accurate. But you have to start somewhere. And since then, I'm very disciplined in my way of writing, in my way of researching, my way of promoting the books as well. And it's going well after this time. But I have to tell you, you have the ambition to write the book. You have to be realistic. You have to realize that you have to spend the time doing the research, writing the book. And especially what people do not realize is that the editing, what I'm talking about, the corrections and the rewriting process, usually is much more intensive than writing itself, because you can write, I mean, I can write fairly quickly, for instance, but the first draft usually requires a lot of changes, a lot of corrections, until you have something that you can say, well, now it's a really good book that people can read. So I always get a question, I want to write books, I want to do this. I think most people would be able to write a book, at least one book, but they do not realize the amount of work it represents. It's not something that you're going to do in a few days or a few hours. And even if you write very quickly, as I did in 4 weeks, the whole process took me about 8 months, because you have to do so many corrections. I was able to write very quickly, but the quality was very poor, and it took a massive amount of corrections to get it to a level that I think, okay, now it's a good book. So yes, anybody can do it, in the sense that the skills, most people have the skills, but to have the discipline and the commitment to doing that, it is relatively rare.
Yes. Okay, so my last question for you is, if you could travel anywhere with any author, whether they be dead or alive, who would it be? Where would you go, and why?
I would take any of the Russian authors from the 18th century. So it would be Chekhov or Turgenev, or would be Dostoevsky or Tolstoy, because basically they created very sophisticated fiction and very sophisticated stories that I find admirable, considering the environment they have to write in. You have to see that it was a very poor environment in terms of economics. And basically they created stories, and they created novels that millions of people were able to buy, even when the country was very poor. They were able to buy, and people would actually save sometimes for months to be able to buy the complete works of Chekhov. And this is amazing. You have to imagine people were workers or peasants that were making very little money, and they saved money, or sometimes they subscribed to a magazine just to get the books published or the books delivered in different chapters. And I find this very admirable. I think it was a great period for literature. And if I could choose whom to meet, I would really go to Russia, 18th century, 19th century, because this period, I find it amazing.
That is all we have today for The Ready Writer. I want to thank my guest, John Vespasian. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a great day.